You know how we do. You know how we do.
This message was inspired by Edward Anderson, Don Calypso, BGS Ipmore, and Grinch, supported by BGS Ipmore and Black Agent, and made necessary by not only intentionally dysfunctionally negative stereotypical hyenas and baboons of both genders, but by their sympathizers and supporters. My name is Black Mind, the shiniest shine, and I approve of this message.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of y'all, and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. Can you guys hear me okay now? How's the sound coming through, gentlemen? Please let me know how I sound at this point. On my screen, it says my microphone's working, but let me know if you guys can hear me okay. All right, excellent, excellent. All right, so gentlemen, that being said, you were not experiencing blindness or power failure. You were experiencing the immense blackness of the presence of Black Mind, the shiniest shine. When this live stream is over, your vision will go back to normal. This is a Black service announcement. You're welcome. So that being said, y'all saw the title, you know what it is. And I've explained who it is that inspired this. Uh, this one is probably not going to be saved on YouTube right off the bat. I'm not so sure if I want to put the whole thing up on YouTube, but I do plan to put it onto my Patreon, or to upload it, or to at least take the audio from it and make it available on the Patreon. This is my first time doing a live stream in which I actually have a Cash App, because it's something that I just set up a few days ago. So I previously did not have it. And so I was asked about it, and it really did take a long time to get Cash App set up because I don't live there. Living over here, they've done some pretty good work in making sure that you cannot install or utilize Cash App from over here. So I had to go through some deception, some cyber deception, and everything else to finally get it set up. So I put it in there. If anyone does send anything to it while the live stream is going, it may take a few minutes for me to be able to see it. So forgive me for being slow if that's what happens. It may take a few minutes for me to know. So therefore, my shouts out and my appreciation may take a long time as well. Um, so if you do put anything in and then you hear about it 5 minutes later, sorry about that. That's just when I saw it. You guys know I grew up. I grew up Huxtable, and growing up Huxtable, um, honestly, we didn't come up as stereotypes. There were some loose girls in the neighborhood. I found out later on. I didn't know this growing up, but in all honesty, I'm not gonna lie to you and tell you all that we had problems with teenage pregnancy that I knew of. Um, what we faced was something else, and that was that around the time I was in, I would say that, yeah, about the time I was in sixth grade, I began to really see it, and that was this want to be like the guys from other neighborhoods. Usually, those of us growing up Huxtable, like myself, had cousins in worse neighborhoods within the same city. Now, my family was different. My closest cousins lived pretty far away. They lived um, in the northern part of Mississippi, and they were the closest relatives. I mean, geographically speaking, closest relatives I had. My closest grandparents lived in the southwestern United States. So my family wasn't from the town in which I and my brother grew up. But problem was that for whatever reason, uh, oh, okay, this is really, thank you so much. Shout out to Simeon for the $10. Um, and I forgot to tell you guys that the reason I'm making these things available and making the knowledge available to you as far as Bitcoin goes, and if anybody sends anything um, to one of my crypto wallets, I won't know about that right off the bat. That's going to take a while because that just does take a while to update on my end. So I may not know about it, but shouts out in advance to anyone that does that. But um, the reason that I've made y'all aware of this is because for the next few months, I'm going to go ahead and do this full time, inshallah. Um, and that is because since I'm not teaching actively and I had a bit more free time in the day, I'm learning more about what it means to live abroad. And I'm learning more in these recent months than what I've learned in the previous 8 years. And I learned a lot in the previous 8 years. I learned a lot every year. But in about the last month, I've learned even more about what changes are taking place with regards to politics, with regards to feminism as well, what this means for you guys, because certain things that change here signal an even quicker and faster change in the regions in which many of you like to travel and vacation. You don't come to this part of the world where I live and work for a vacation. It's not something you do. You can, but people just don't. They will one day, but right now people don't. You might take a vacation in Dubai. You're not going to take one right next door in Abu Dhabi. You might take a vacation in Oman. People like it. You're not going to take a vacation in Saudi. You're not going to take one in Qatar or Kuwait or Bahrain, for that matter. So they're nice places to be, but you're not going to take a vacation there. The neighboring countries do. But since I've learned a good bit, I want to go ahead and pass that on to you guys. And so I'll be doing this more often, full time. Okay. Myron for the 5. Thanks a million from the bottom of my black heart and from the depths of my black mind. So about this culture, the IDNS culture, I'm going in today because when I was coming up, as I stated, the gentleman from my neighborhood, coming up Huxtable, whose mothers and fathers had made sacrifices, both parents had made sacrifices to put their butts in this comfortable zip code, oftentimes had cousins from worse neighborhoods. And my hometown had quite a few of them. And for some reason, there was this sense of guilt that many had. And they were covering up this sense of guilt. And so nobody wanted to be soft. And I understand that. You don't want to be an easy target. That makes sense. But unfortunately, there was something worse going on. And that is that people felt like they were selling out because they lived in these nice neighborhoods. And they weren't. Mom and dad had done what was necessary to put them in these nice areas. And so consequently, they felt guilty because their cousins might still have it hard. And many of them did not know that their mothers and fathers were helping out their aunts and uncles and by extension their cousins anyway. So when I look back, I realized that those cousins that I did get a chance to meet were usually better dressed, better spoken. And what was the reason? Because they had some help when they would come visit my friends from my neighborhood. You could see the help. You could see why it was that my neighborhood colleagues' parents made it into that neighborhood. You could see what the reasons were. Maybe they grew up in bad areas, but the grandparents that my friends and their cousins shared did not raise any fools, did not raise idness. But you see, the guilt crept in. Now, it didn't work in my case. My cousins weren't ghetto. My cousins were country. They grew up on a farm. So they bragged about that stuff. Yeah, I'm telling you, Black, we grew up in the country, man. We got to work hard now. And they acted like they had to pick cotton for a living. They lived on a bunch of acres that their dad could afford because he was a dentist. Later on, we came to find out that their dad was the town philanderer and that they had a bunch of siblings all over the county. And then they even had a bunch of first cousins that they thought were siblings because their dad was an identical twin and his identical twin brother was following in his footsteps, sometimes maybe even posing as him, getting up in some guts. And then later on, when some lady would say, well, Dr. So-and-so owes me some child support, he'd be like, man, did I lay down with her? And his twin brother would say, man, you remember when you got drunk at that pool party? Yeah, man, you did on the pool table. I know, exactly. It is insane. So even my cousins who weren't ghetto, they came up in which they were the richest kids on the block, or they were the richest Black kids on the block, or in this case, out in the countryside. And they felt this too. They felt this guilt. And so now I look at some heroes from my neighborhood like Brick. Brick got a felony for an armed robbery. I didn't even think he did it when I heard about it. I thought it wasn't him. He told me years later, no, man, that was me. I messed it up. I had to do time for it. And that's why I can't vote right now. And I can't own a weapon. I kid you not. And this was one of the nice guys. He was good in football and basketball. Really tall, 6'2" when he was 16, bench pressing 400 pounds. He didn't have to really prove anything to anybody, and he could fight. Cats who came from bad neighborhoods could not stand up to him in the ring. If he had to fight Roy Jones in Roy Jones' prime, he would have put a whooping on Roy Jones. Roy would not have knocked him down. I kid you not. He felt he had to prove something. And one of his boys to whom he felt he had to prove something was the one that gave him up to the cops when he was wanted for this armed robbery, but they didn't know who did it. His boy got caught doing some other dumb stuff and it gave him up. But see, his boy was from the hood. Brick was from the Huxtable neighborhood. Yeah, it's like that. Matter of fact, now looking back on it, I now know. At the time, it became clear to me about middle school, but at the time, I didn't know what I knew now. I can now look back and I can see the effects that it had on some of the guys in the neighborhood when I was in second grade, third grade. One of them, I don't mind giving up his name because he's since passed away, but I'm not going to give up his whole name, but his last name was Evans. Dude sold a bunch of drugs along the Gulf Coast. And he did this for years. This guy was 16, living in the house next door to his parents because he could buy the house before he could vote. And he had the cash to do it. Now, back then, of course, the homes weren't terribly expensive, but this dude somehow, he was selling drugs. He didn't get caught for years. He was riding around in he bought a kind of used Mercedes, lightly used. It was still a Mercedes. I'm sorry, it was a BMW. I apologize. It was a BMW. He rode around in that thing, and to show the money he had, he kept that thing running for decades. Later on, he got picked up with my partner, Pinky. Now, I'm not giving Pinky's real name. He's still alive. Turned out the reason they got picked up was because one of the guys in my neighborhood that was not into any of this IDNS stuff was a victim of another aspect of nigger culture. And I'm going to go ahead and say it like that. It's not that his uncle dug him out when he was a little boy. That's what I'm attributing to us, because even amongst the IDNS, that's a crime that's inhuman. Even amongst the IDNS, they say, "No, bro, that's nasty, that's sick," and they right. What I'm telling you all is that this other cat, ironically, his initials are DP. I'm not giving his name again. Was a victim of his uncle in a way that nobody should have been a victim of any adult when they're kids, even when they're adults. But when he went and told what happened, everybody said he was making it up. Hush now. Don't you be talking that foolishness round here. Weens don't know nothing about that. Your uncle's a good man. He babysits you when we's busy. So what did this, you know what happens to some victims of crimes like that? What happens to them when they get older? Put it in the chat. If you know somebody that's been a victim of a crime like that, what's the worst thing that happens to them when they get older? I'll fuck the shuck up while give y'all time to put it in the chat. Oh, I'm going somewhere with this. See, DP, I'm gonna let y'all type in what y'all think happened. The DP was the one that gave them up. He gave up Pinky and Evans. But what y'all put in the chat what y'all think happened. What y'all think happened to DP? The thing is that DP was the victim. He did expose his uncle to his parents. It's true. The parents thought he was somehow making it up. And at that time, to be fair, there were kids that were hearing about stuff like this and making up their own stories. That did happen. But no, what wound up being the case was that DP became the same way. He got older and he started to have a predilection for those who were not quite of a decent age difference from himself. Now, he went and got help for it. When he was young, he qualified to get certain medicines at a discount. When he got older, Mr. Shug to you, Thank you, Mr. Shub. Victors, sometimes they become aggressors. Now, of course, not all victims do, but most aggressors were victims at some point. He needed money to get this medicine that suppressed suppressed his libido. And he was an adult and he started to run out of his own money. So in order to get money from the cops to get this medicine, he went to the cops and said, listen, I got information, but I need money for this medicine. I'm a law-abiding citizen because I take this medicine. So what he did was he went and he got this money and he gave up Pinky and Evans. And that's how the two of them got picked up. Pinky had to bribe his way out of it. And of course, Gulf Coast politics back then, well, they were pretty corrupt. Everybody knew about this. There have been a string of arrests along the Gulf Coast. The parishes and counties of the Gulf Coast have witnessed, this is right before the feds begin to move in. So he bought his way out some charges. That's Pinky. Evans couldn't do that because Evans got picked up and he was retained by the feds and charged by them. But DP, who was a victim, was the one that gave them up so that he would not become an aggressor. The money ran out. And eventually DP gave in to his inner demons, and he victimized a minor in the neighborhood. He immediately turned himself in and confessed. He's still in prison now for it. It's been a major tragedy for that family because DP's brother died of cancer about a year later. So his parents had to lose two sons. But Pinky and Evans got arrested because even though they came from good homes, they wanted to be able to say to the dudes on the block in neighborhoods in which we didn't live in the first mother cuss word place that they got their own money, that they didn't get it from their parents. That's what they wanted to be able to say. So they went and sold things they shouldn't have sold to say stuff like this. And of course, they were getting into fights too, unnecessarily. Because they wanted to be the swaggerilla niggerillas at the high school and in our neighborhood. And the thing is, Pinky was not a bad dude. He's a loyal friend to this day. But by the time Pinky matured out of this mess, he was too old for this. By the time he matured out of it, we were in our 20s. And some would say, well, you know, the teenage years, you got to go through them. We don't have to go through an IDNS phase. And at some point, even those who were down with the IDNS culture are not coming out and saying you don't have to go through that phase just because you black and you got to be a teenager if you live long enough. Somewhere down the line, we got to start saying that. We got to start saying that if you live long enough, yeah, you're going to be a teen, but you don't have to go through an IDNS phase at any point in your life. What BGS said was right. We have equated the worst stereotypes with what we're supposed to be. This is the reason why we looked at Sierra and Russell's marriage and didn't expect it to last as long as it did. Because for most of the people we know in real life, it would not. Because for most of the Sierras that we know in real life who grow up Huxtable, they're even more adamant about getting an IDNS like what Future pretends to be, because he wasn't like this when he was growing up, by the way. And they will be more adamant about getting someone like Russell to be the cleanup man, even though he's really not. That's what's going on here. We're looking at a situation in which, for most people in real life, it's exactly what we assume that their situation is as celebrities. Now, theirs is different, that's true. But from the outside looking in, of course, knowing what we know, it fits the pattern. I understand why a lot of people think what we think about that. I also understand that BGS, having inside knowledge, knows where they're different, where they're exceptions to the rule, but we know what the rule is. However, That's the point, is that the pattern exists because we think what we think because the pattern exists, and the pattern exists. And so therefore we're seeing this and we start thinking to ourselves, okay, you know what? The reason for much of the population that exists is due to the IDNS culture. And most of the children born to these IDNS guys and IDNS posers, by the way, counterfeit IDNS, don't become IDNS themselves, because actual criminals and lawbreakers are not a big portion of any population, really, including ours. But you see what we're going with this. You see that this has shaped the very DNA of our community. Not that criminal tendencies come with DNA. I don't know. I'm not an expert on that. But what I'm saying is that the population of children we have is directly because sisters have wanted this, because they and we have determined at some point that the authenticity of your blackness is based on you being a niggerilla swaggerilla. A low IQ, chest thumping, basketball dunking, gun toting stereotype who can't pass a drug test and with bodies. Even though most people of any population don't kill, we still associate ourselves with this. And the good thing I wanted to say to you all is that those of you in my audience, shouts out to you guys. And it's not just because y'all send me some cash apps either. And I really do appreciate them too. Matter of fact, let me double check while I'm saying this. But I wanted to send you guys some appreciation because you guys, you represent Passport Brothers, Passport Gang, SYSBM, IBMOR. You represent finally a pushback against the narrative, not just against IDNS culture, but the narrative that that's authentically Black culture in the United States or in any other Western Hemisphere nation that's Anglophone, like Jamaica, which a man's going to talk about tomorrow, inshallah, like Barbados, like the Bahamas, like Guyana, like Belize, like Trinidad and Tobago. You see, you represent the narrative that that's not the culture and that that's not our representation anymore. You represent the pushback. You represent a change in this culture. You represent the understanding that no more. No more. We're going to be represented by this. And let's be honest. As an FBA man myself, who's also for Black people globally, especially Black males, we have to be honest that non-FBA Black folks don't have a right to look down on us because we're actually that way. But they do have a right to look down on us because we have accepted the narrative that we're that way, even though we really aren't as a whole. In other words, we ourselves think we're worse than what we really are. What the hell do we expect other Black folks who are not exactly FBA but are related to us to think about us if we think this way about ourselves? If we ourselves judge our authenticity by how IDNS somebody is. See, until the day that the little boys in the hood no longer want to be real niggas, and I'm saying it just like that, comes about, and we see that day, then we are still better than what we think, but we've not begun to actually improve from what we are. No, the IDNS is not the majority. The IDNS is just our own stereotype. See, IDNS, IDNS, stands for intentionally dysfunctional negative stereotype. But understand too, the stereotype is not just our enemy stereotype of us. It's also our stereotype of ourselves. And that's where the issue comes in. So no, I'm not going to sit up and say that somebody coming over from a particular region of Nigeria have the right to look down on FBA when they land in the States. They don't, because they look down on even other Nigerians and make a bad name. But what I would say is that not only do they, but even other non-FBA people have the right to wonder about us, at least to look at us sideways, because those of us that don't practice the IDNS religion, live the IDNS lifestyle, still to a certain extent give credibility to it. And I'm talking beyond just humor. It's beyond just maybe me calling somebody blood, because in the 70s, black men called each other blood, which is where I got it from. It doesn't mean you kill Crips. I'm talking beyond humorous stuff like that. See, a lot of us now in this audience are not like this, but there was a time when we were growing up and we were this way. We weren't IDNS, but we sympathized, we empathized, we supported it. We complimented somebody by calling them a real nigga. The funny thing is, if I turn around and I said that you so black your blood type is Pennzoil, you so black you went to the blood bank and they sold your blood to Chevron and cleared out all their debts, you would think it was an insult. And I just gave you a compliment. If I sit up and, you know, the way I brag about myself, even though it's a joke, if I sit up here and I say, man, you know what, bro, you so black, you sat in my car and sneezed and tinted the windows, you think it's an insult. But we used to call somebody real nigga for being a stereotype. Oh yeah, it's like that. Inmates in Texas, back during the days of the chain gangs, used to call each other stoned down gorilla, and that was the highest compliment that inmates could give each other in some of the prisons in Texas. Now again, this is about 40s and 50s. A stoned down gorilla. I mean, granted, I actually look like a gorilla. So when sometimes people that know me compare me to one, it's jokes. But back in the 40s and 50s, when people thought that gorillas were aggressive, even though they're not, stop and think about the fact that this was a compliment. What the hell did our enemies used to call us? Monkeys and apes. And we internalized that. When I worked at once when I needed a job, back when I was living in Atlanta, I went to the mosque for one of the prayers. Mind you, I was between jobs. I didn't know what I was going to do. This is early 2000s, really bad recession. And I was new out of college, so I didn't have much work experience. So nobody was going to hire me for any job that was really worth getting up and going to in the mornings. Matter of fact, nobody was really willing to pay anyone in my position enough to even keep a full tank to get to and from work. That's how bad it was back then. Met a brother from India. He had a jewelry store. Good morning, Red Falls Black. And he said, well, look, you can work part-time for me. Turn into full-time. But you know what? When I showed up at the address he gave me, it was a flea market. So I figured he had a jewelry store in the flea market. Turned out that jewelry store, while technically it was one, really only did business in the following: gold teeth, crucifixes, and medallions in the images of guns or marijuana leaves. I am not promoting drug use, YouTube, so don't flag this video for it. I'm against it. But the only jewelry he could sell were either gold teeth, if you want to count that as jewelry, or crucifixes, which are instruments of violence in history, especially for us Muslims, or medallions in the image of guns, another weapon, or illicit drugs, narcotics, even if they're mild. And what is the reason for this? He had a whole inventory of regular run-of-the-mill normal jewelry. When he bought into the business, the previous owner didn't tell him, you're going to be selling to a bunch of people who, due to intergenerational or multi-generational trauma, now believe that they're baboons. And so therefore, they're going to buy nothing but gold teeth and medallions in negative images. And I'm counting the crucifix as a negative image because it was an instrument of execution in the days of the Roman Empire. It's like selling a medallion in the form of an electric chair today. So I started to look at the clientele because, you know, this was a flea market in the hood. And I began to notice that the ones that came up to us, number one, they typically wanted fangs on their gold teeth, on their grills. That's one thing. So they wanted to look like something that wasn't human. The way their pants would sag and the way their shirts were extra long would cause them to walk a particular way, as if they weren't used to walking bipedally. You understand? Swaggering back and forth, like a baboon trying to walk home on its two legs. They didn't realize this. Subconsciously, they were imitating monkeys, non-human, quadrupedal, knuckle-walking primates. They had internalized the enemy stereotypes of them. And so now, I'm here to condemn that whole culture. And we all got to do this. The next time somebody says anything about us being a real N-word, that's when we need to stop and say, no, I'm a real man and a real black man on top of that. We ain't niggas, baby. We men. Stop taking that as a compliment. Even if you appreciate the intention behind the person saying it, elevate their minds, we no longer let them bring us to that level. Even when we have sympathy for them. What we got to do is we got to start saying, you know what? When we start seeing teenagers, if you decide you do want to mentor a black teenage male, and he shows any of these ignorant tendencies, you stop him. Nuh-uh, no. Not for 1 second is that okay. Even to the point that when somebody writes and they can't be bothered to write correctly in whatever their first language is, if it's English, if it's French. I'm not talking about people who are learning English as a second language. They're going to misspell things. But even to the point with someone for whom English is their first language, but they can't be bothered to write correctly and differentiate between which homophone to use in which sentence, in which context, based on the meaning, even then we condemn them. Okay, you're an anti-intellectual. Get out of my face. And that's when you call somebody the N-word. And why the hell not? If they can't be bothered to learn to spell correctly in the first language they speak, that's anti-intellectualism. That's the bare minimum. Forget tattoos, swagger, grill, felonies even. Forget about all of that. Start with anti-intellectualism. Start just with that. If he doesn't want to be a bookworm himself, fine. The minute he got something negative to say about somebody else because somebody else is in them books, that's where we cut them off and say, you are an N-word. You're an idness. All you need is some felonies and a baby mama. You're the one we don't need. Walaikum salam, Abdullah al-Amriki. We got to start going in on people for that and cutting them off for that. I already stated what it is that is a standard. I mentioned this before, and Abdullah al-Amriki is just in time to hear this. I think he's heard it before. And the only reason I'm saying this on YouTube instead of saving it for Patreon is because I've already said it on YouTube for over 2 years now. If somebody was idness and decides they don't want to be that anymore, the bare minimum has to be the Malcolm X standard. Because Malcolm's attitude towards education not only changed, but it was a 180. Don't say 360. A 360-degree turn is the same as no turn at all. Did you know that? 360 degrees is the same as 0 degrees when you're talking about a turn. 360 degrees means full circle. That means you face the original direction you were facing before you began turning. So we should stop saying 360-degree turn. That right there shows that you didn't pay attention in school. Opposite direction is a 180-degree turn. And that's what Malcolm did. Not a 360-degree turn. He made a 180-degree turn when he was locked up in the penitentiary in Massachusetts. His attitude towards education was a 180. He might have had some jokes about those that were in the books if he had stayed in high school. I think he dropped out. But if he had stayed in high school, he would have had some jokes about the ones that were really in them books and learning. But guess what? Before he got out of prison, not when he got out, before he got out, when he was still in the prison, locked up with the worst, he went in that library and he taught himself. That needs to be the bare minimum. The next time somebody wants to become a motivational speaker, just because they used to be in this, just because they used to be in them streets, we should demand that of them. If they sound the same, if they're talking after their IDNS days, sounding the same as those that are still in the IDNS phase or who glorify it, then we say no. And we tell the kids, don't listen to them. Or at least don't pay to listen to them. Okay, all right, listen to them, but never pay to listen to them. Save the paid speaking engagements for the ones that met the Malcolm X standard. They went against the anti-intellectualism. That's the basis. Because that's the beginning of the slippery slope into full-blown IDNS culture. Nigger culture. That's when you got baby mamas and felonies. You start falling behind on child support, and you got to face a tough choice between committing another felony to try to make enough money to stay up on child support, or stay on the straight and narrow but remain behind on child support, and you can't get a passport. This right here. Thank you, George. Not only are they doing it, let's be honest. Why are they doing it? Because there's a market for it. Yeah, I used to do all that, man. Okay, why are you telling me that? The only correct answer to that, and it needs to be in correct English too. Even if they sound ethnic, it still needs to be in correct English. The only proper answer to why are you talking about all that you used to do should be because I don't want you to do it. I know why you shouldn't do it. I wish I hadn't done it. And when I'm done talking, you need to pay to go and listen to this other guy tell you why you should never do it and what the benefits and the rewards are for never doing this. And for doing exactly what it is that you think is too square and beneath you to do when you're young. That is the only correct answer. Why are you talking about it? Because I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't do it. And he who never did this stuff is worth paying to listen to when he tells you why you shouldn't, why you never should. I'm not saying that everybody's got to be a bookworm. But what I am saying is that that square pro-educational, pro-knowledge path is the only correct one to take, behaviorally speaking. There is no other one to take. And see, you in the audience, you guys understand this. But we got to start spreading this as well. And that's another reason that I'm doing this live now on YouTube. I may only leave it up on Patreon. I'm not sure. I'm still debating it. Because I do want to do this full time, and I'm not willing to experience this a loss of a single penny of income for it. But nonetheless, what I'm getting at is that you guys, you can spread this in person. I can do it electronically. You guys can do it both ways. BGS was right. The problem is that our people, many of whom are not even IDNS, still think that is the standard of blackness. Now, a lot of women are not going to go along with this, and we just got to understand that. a lot of sistren, and they're sisters to each other. I'm not calling them ours. And I'm talking Huxtable sisters. A lot of Huxtable sisters are going to go right along with it. They can be intellectual, they can be educated, and they get that way too. But they're going to shun you, both sexually and otherwise, if you are as well. There's always a respect they're going to have for that IDNS gorilla, which is actually an insult to gorillas to call them that, than they're going to have for you or me. And we got to understand that we got to lead them behind. That's what the passport's all about. The reason we need to oppose this actually is, again, it's for the benefit of the young boys. I don't expect somebody my age to come off that mess. Y'all heard Minister Knapp. I still haven't finished listening to Grinch roast him. But you all heard what Minister Knapp had to say. Just telling you that you need to stay and try to win the validation of that hyena. And I'm going to say it, that hyena bitch. Because if I'm not mistaken, that's what you call a female hyena. I know it's what you call a female canine. I know that. I'm trying to remember what the specific word is for hyena. But for some reason, I want to say it was the same thing. Scientifically speaking, you know what I'm getting at. What he's trying to say, and this is also a bare minimum. He doesn't have to tell you to get out there and try to get you some felonies. His willingness to get into fistfights over dumb stuff, especially with somebody's phone aimed at him, that's bad enough. His willingness to brag about any kind of street credibility at his age in his 40s is bad enough. His willingness to tell you that you, instead of repatriating or performing hijra, should forego the passport and keep your behind over there in the belly of the beast that caters to the hyena bitch and try to win her approval is bad enough. It's suicidal enough. It is just as bad as if he said, you need to go out there and get you some felonies and some street credibility, because guess what? It's the same thing. If you're going to try to do anything with her, whether you just trying to fornicate, hopefully not, or you trying to start a family, if you have the ability to meet her outdoors, to know she even exists, the chances are she's on that hyena business, even if she's Huxtable. And she's going to demand that you be on that stuff too. So that's why it is we got to oppose this, because we're doing it for the young boys. You don't have to mentor them if you don't want to. That's up to you. If you're a childless black man, you don't have to. If you got kids, you only got to mentor your own kids, technically speaking. If you don't owe anybody any mentoring. But even if you don't mentor, we should be doing this. See, remember when I told you that we should be demanding the right, even if we have to do it sneakily, under the radars of their mothers, telling the boys what is wrong with the sexual selection of the hyena, and telling them to question their mother's own selection of their biological father, if she's a single mom. Even if she's not. Remember, I said this to you all a few uploads ago. We need to oppose the IDNS culture and say, damn the IDNS culture. Damn this idea of being a real nigga. Damn all of that. As a matter of fact, damn the anti-intellectualism. And even some of the honest mistakes. We need to say damn them too, because it means your ignorant ass didn't read, nigga. We need to start saying this so that the young boys hear this. Because the mechanism by which they could still be tricked into trying to get the approval and the validation of that hyena bitch after they know better is thinking that there's something legitimate about how she's choosing. Oh, it's biology. She can't help herself. And smart men who don't have brawn can't make it. Never let him forget that man runs the planet, and we do not have claw nor fang. We don't even have that kind of brawn. Almost every other primate is much stronger than us. even smaller monkeys. Oh, yeah. Get into a tug of war with a baboon. You weigh more than a baboon, but I bet you he'll yank that rope out your hand. They're strong. Yet we run things. Our species, and it is mostly the males that run things because we have to. And it is with the brain that we do it. We sharpen weapons and build and control fire. This is not something that any other species does. If you believe in Bigfoot, you don't believe that they control fire. This is something that we do. And while man or woman can build and control fire, it is man that has done so in order to run the planet. But yet and still, when these boys are young, one of the things that can happen is that they can think that, you know what, it's not brains that run things, it's brawn. And I can understand why the women want that. We can subvert the entire culture by just simply letting the young boys know we are against this. We are real men. We are real black men. We're not real niggas. And guess what? We're against the IDNS culture. That's what we got to start doing. Because if you don't mentor them boys, guess what? If they see this attitude in us, that's going to have an impact on them. And I'm leaving Abdullah Mariki's comment up because I want to point this out. See, when you are conscious and you mean well, if you don't like to read and you don't value education, I mean actual education, knowledge, but you just want to be moral, there's a problem with that too. Look at that. Negus is not the origin of the word nigger. And it's not pronounced negus. I learned the Amharic language, about a third of the Amharic language, when I lived in Atlanta because I hung out with Ethiopians. I wanted to learn an African language. I wanted to tick white folks off. And I did. We would hang out, and when white folks came around, I would use Amharic just to exclude their butts. I was like that back then. I don't apologize for it today, but I wouldn't do it. But I learned the word for king. It's negus. Kings is negusoch. Now, in the old language from which Amharic came, which is Gez, I think it's negast. The word nega in Amharic actually means history. Negast is king, kings in the old language, but in the modern Amharic, negusoch is kings, pluralized. So some of us like to say my negus. No, it's my negus. And if you're going to possessivize it correctly, and ask an Amharic speaker how to say my king, neguse, or yene negus. See, we don't like to read, and that's the bare minimum. A sister, one of my wife's friends, a sister, Salafi sister from Philadelphia. Nice lady. She's helped me out a good bit. May Allah bless her. You know, the same one that said that the thing she missed about marriage was arguing because she's broken. That's what this does. IDNS culture has female victims just like it does male victims. Her mother, and mind you, this lady was born Muslim. Her mother was the one that became Muslim. Her mother was quick to slap her and punish her when she was a kid, so she got in trouble for stuff she didn't do. It traumatized her a little bit. She sat at dinner with my wife and me one day and told us this. The same one that told us she missed arguing, and that's what she missed about marriage, told us that she was taking notes about how it was that I treated my wife. And I'm not bragging. I'm treating my wife the way that my dad treats my mother. So I'm really just following an example. I'm glad it worked. I really am. And my wife has complimented it. And I've had to tell her, you're welcome, baby. I'm glad to do it, but I can't take credit. I'm really just copying dad. You're welcome. But this lady, I mentioned her because she has to She's going through trauma now because, see, if she gets accused for something she did not do, it reactivates that trauma. And I know that feeling because I got the same thing. Only I didn't get it from my parents. I got it from niggas. Just like she did. She got it from mom and niggas. And I'm calling them niggas because that's what they were. She had to write a report to defend herself because a machine misgraded some papers. A Scantron bubble sheet was misgraded by a machine, and she's got to write a letter to defend herself. But you know what? She has a little bit of that anti-intellectualism in her. You know what I meant? No, you're an English teacher. You have to write this correctly. I had to edit her report. I had to change punctuation, some spelling. But I even had to change vocabulary because she used a word outside of its meaning. Think about that for a second. Now look at this next comment. I'm putting this comment up on the screen for this reason. It's 38 of you gentlemen, so I want to thank all 38 of you for watching, but I want to ask you guys to do something else for me. I want to ask you guys, would you please hit the share button? I want to ask y'all to do that. That's important. Please hit that share button. And this is during and after. I need y'all to do that. 35 likes, and I really, from the bottom of my black heart and the depth of my black mind, I really do appreciate that. So believe me when I tell you that I appreciate the likes. I really do. But most importantly, right now, is that share button. Red Falls Black, thank you so much. From the bottom of my black heart and the depth of my black mind, thank you. And I mean that. You guys are just in time, by the way, because a $200 expense just hit the account. So you guys, you all really are just in time. I didn't even know it was going to hit today. But yeah, you guys are just in time with this. I was unaware. All right, nameless protagonist. What's going on, man? And thanks for hitting those buttons. Matter of fact, let me hit some replies to these right quick. Now, where was I? So I'm letting you guys read Abdullah's comment. And the reason is because this is something that is not just, it's not just him. It's not just me. It's not just you. It's everybody in here that had the temerity to use words like temerity. Everyone in here that had the audacity to learn something, to utilize vocabulary. Simeon, thanks a million again. From the bottom of my black heart and the depth of my black mind, thank you so much. See, everyone in here that had, you all saw it, because if it wasn't you growing up, then you saw it happen to somebody else. We all did. And that's important to understand. Every last one of us saw this growing up. If you didn't witness it happen to you, you saw someone else go through it. Some of you even took some lumps on your head because you defended somebody for doing it. And if you were the one dishing it out, today you're in my audience. So chances are you're dead set against this sort of thing. And you should be. If you were the one dishing it out, yeah, you do owe it. Not to me personally, but you do owe it to the community that is worth in saving, that is worth the effort. You owe it to them. The members of the community that are worth something, you owe it to them to turn around and go against that sort of thing and admit, I was wrong when I did it. And if I catch you doing it, I'm going to rat you out. Because the anti-intellectualism is actually grade 1. It's level 1. What's going on, Lance? Salute to you too. That's grade 1. That's level 1. That's the first step on a slippery slope into full-blown IDNS felonies, baby mamas, and the inability to get a passport to repatriate. Because see, understand something. If you want to do what A. LaRue was saying, leave the West, which we do need to do, because let's be honest, the only way to save the Black community is to not try to save the one that's in the U.S. But there are two things that have to be necessary, two things that are necessary that have to be done. Number 1, passports and repatriation. And for some of us, that's hijra. Abdullah al-Amariki and Abdullah bin Babi Tayyib, they know that it's hijra. They know what I mean when I say that. Same as repatriation for the most part, except, well, for us, it's much deeper. The reasons are much deeper. But yeah, we got to move. We were supposed to do this decades ago. We should have. And I'm going to talk about what that's got to do with hip hop in a little bit. But see, we should have done this decades ago, fit the guck up out the belly of the beast. But the other thing, too, is that we have to admit that there are young boys that are innocent, and there are young girls that are innocent. And they don't deserve to be trapped in this prison that has become the N-word culture. I'm like you, Abdullah. I'd rather not use that word. Unfortunately, some people insist on being it, and that's what I'm referring to in this case. Like you, I don't like it. I don't prefer it. I just understand that when someone says that's what I am and I'm going to be that all the way, then unfortunately, to speak to that mindset, I got to give it a name. And to identify it to the listener, I got to wind up using the one that the carriers of that mindset have held. But see, we got to create an alternative to that as well. Those of us who are still stuck in the West, while you're there, create an alternative community to the N-word. And that's what you're doing right now. And that's important. It is important that we create this, and that's what we're doing. And see, just like the N-word, just like the ninja, just like the nigger really, has certain ways of dressing that identify them to each other. I'm in discussion right now with somebody else to come up with some t-shirts or some golf shirts, actually t-shirts and golf shirts. And in the long run, passport wallets, the folding passport holders. But in the short term, t-shirts and golf shirts. So that when you, Passport Brothers, Passport Gang, SYSBM, and IPMOR, do travel, you can wear them during the travel. You can wear them to the airport so that you can know each other by sight. We're in discussion now to get some designs done. And what he wants to do is he's trying to ask the artist, and he's trying to come up with some money to pay the artist to come up with designs, one for Passport Bros, the other for Passport Gang, and the other one for SYSBM. He's trying to do this now because this ability to recognize each other on site is going to be necessary in order for us to build this alternative, not only path, but alternative community. Because see, we're not here to sit up and take on the financial burdens of other men's kids. That's true. We're not. It's not our job. Nameless protagonist is right. I would apologize for that burp, but I'm actually kind of proud of it. So no apologies, gentlemen. I'm going to brag about it later. It had, I don't know if the microphone picked it up, but it kind of had like a motorcycle engine rumble to it. I'm going to get better as time goes on, though, inshallah. One of these days I'm going to burp and people are going to think a tiger escaped from the zoo. That's my goal. I'm just joking, guys. I don't have that kind of goal. But look at what Nameless Protagonist said. We were speaking earlier about how the insecurity that really creates this environment of anti-intellectualism ends up having people succeed in spite of the community, not because of it. Only to be called back to clean up messes we never made and punished and shamed for having been responsible. then get disrespected in the many instances when we do. It's mind-boggling. Pay attention to that, gentlemen. Nameless Protagonist is one of three people whose Patreon I would pay to be a part of. Now, I don't know if you have a Patreon or not, Nameless, but as my own Patreon takes off and I collect more, then I'm going to look and see if you have one, because you're one of three people whose content I'm willing to pay to see once I get an income, or rather once I replace an income, and then get another one teaching, inshallah. And it's largely because of your articulacy when you do it, when you put out the content. You know what though, Abdullah? What you just said right here. Right? Hold on. There it is. That's why I had to come up with IDNS to replace that. It's just that unfortunately, not a lot of people know what I mean when I say IDNS. And really, if you guys don't want to use IDNS and spread it, you don't have to, but we got to come up with something so that we're not using the N word, but people would understand that to which we're creating an alternative with passport users, traveling black men. You see, TBM doesn't only mean thinking black men. It actually means thinking and traveling black men. And if your goal is to travel before you actually travel, I'm still willing to extend to you the compliment of traveling black man. I'm still willing to, because we have to create an alternative to, even though a lot of us ain't from the ghetto, like LOM. Neither you nor I are from there. Most of us in this audience really aren't, but we're from an ethnicity that identifies itself with the ghetto. And that's what we have to create an alternative to avoid. And even though it's not our job to mentor the youth, it's true, it's not. We do still want to give an option, a door through which young black boys and young black men can walk if they're simply willing to better themselves and look and see a demonstration as to how it's done. That's what we're talking about here. Damn IDNS culture, but we're going to be the alternative. We're not just going to make it, actually, we're going to be it. We're going to exemplify it. To answer your question, A. LaRue, IDNS means intentionally dysfunctional negative stereotype. And I'm going to go ahead and spell it in here for anybody to remember. You can say intentionally dysfunctionally negative stereotype, or you can say intentionally dysfunctional negative stereotype. Grammatically speaking, it is equally correct to use dysfunction as an adjective for negative, an adjective for stereotype along with negative, or you can use dysfunctionally as an adverb for the adjective negative for stereotype. Either one. So you can use dysfunctional or dysfunctionally. IDNS covers it. That covers it right there. David Brewster. Oh, my good man. Hold on. Let me hit the responses for these. I'm actually still keying in these responses. Thank you. That was a lot. That was 50. Thank you, sir, from the bottom of my black heart and the depths of my black mind. And that's actually the message that showed up from the bottom of my black heart. Yeah, well, from the bottom of mine and the depth of my black mind, thank you. And you know what? If you want to put from the, okay, A. LaRue, do you mean that we need to put intentionally dysfunctionally negative stereotype on a shirt? Or do we need to put something else on the shirt? I'm just double checking to make sure I get it right. Now, here's a good question. This one here. You see, Abdullah, there are some people that already have to. Some people cannot leave right now, and I'm not blaming them because they can't. Much like in our doctrine, those who cannot perform hijrah, they're clearly off the hook. Now, some would say, does hijrah apply to today or not? And that's another debate. But you're clearly off the hook if you cannot. And that's what I'm getting at. And so I understand that when it comes to this, creating an alternative to the IDNS, really just a black community, an upright community. When it comes to creating that, some people cannot leave. Some people cannot leave permanently, but they have to go back and forth because they got to look after a business in one and they got to look after a relative in the other, maybe a sick parent. I'm probably going to have that. There's a business I will probably have to start in a few years, and I will probably have to travel back and forth. So I may be one of those that has to go back and forth. When you have to be in the West, it's cool to offer the guidance. If you have to be, then that's what you're there for. When you can get out, you got to, because we need both. As long as there's some people who can afford to leave and can't afford to stay, and there's some people who can afford, who can stay, they got to stay and they can't afford to leave, then we need both. Because you see, and I'll put it like this, you and I being Muslim, we have different destinations than the Christians would. A Christian SYSBM or passport holder is probably going to want to go to Thailand or to maybe Vietnam or the northern Philippines as an example, or maybe Colombia or Brazil or the Dominican Republic. That may be their spot. Increasingly, Costa Rica's a spot. So when they go, they're going to pave the way for others to come behind them, and they're doing that, and they're doing it right. My hat goes off to Zoom to Thailand. He didn't go on Passport Bros. He didn't go on any acronym. But my hat goes off to him because he has said, if you do come, get with me, and I'm going to help you get started. I'm going to take you around, show you around. He's doing the right thing. And see, the thing is, if you Muslim, let's say your spot is the southern Philippines or southern Thailand, because that's where the Muslims are in Southeast Asia. Or there's a Muslim community in Colombia, because they do exist, believe it or not. A lot of Muslims didn't know this. So if you're Christian, I don't expect you to know. I don't blame you. But there are growing Muslim communities in Colombia and in Brazil too. Let's say that's where you go, and that's where you head. Then what you got to do is you got to be willing to pay the way for some others. So that if they save enough to get there, you help them not waste everything and blow everything that they got, that they saved up to get off to a good start. And that's what I was trying to get at. Some people, they got to stay, and I don't blame them. They just got to. So, A. LaRue says, okay, you said put what on the shirt? We need to put that on the shirt to let people know. But exactly what should we put on the shirt? I'm just trying to follow it. Exactly what should we put on? Which acronym are you referring to? Because it may be a good idea. And to be honest with you, if you have the idea, A. LaRue, I'm not going to suggest to the aspiring YouTuber with whom I'm in a conference, because he has the link to the artist. I'm not going to suggest to them to do it, because then they will collect the money. And if it's your idea, I want to know what it is. But if it's your idea, I want to make sure you get the money. And I don't want to even risk accidentally coming up with the same idea and putting it on the shirt. And then I wind up collecting the money. Or someone else does. So I'm asking to make sure. And I get what you're saying. You know what? Black Muslims can go to Ethiopia too, because Ethiopia is about split down the middle. They don't even know exactly how many are Christian, how many are Muslim. They only know that each one is somewhere close to half. There's not an official stat on it. There are estimates. Now, this one here, nameless, right? Yes. Western Black men in general do have a particular unique set of experiences. And ADOS have one along with Black Costa Ricans and Black Colombians. we do have, we together have a unique set of experiences because we are minorities in these jurisdictions. Now, many Caribbean people coming from Black islands have a similar set of experiences. However, they have not had the experience of being a minority. They've had the experience of being colonized and downtrodden and in bondage, just not minorities. Okay, so LOM has given us some history. I'm going to go back to yours, Nameless. LOM has given us some history about captivity. Abdullah Amriki, yeah, I'm glad you heard the burp. I got to work on it, though. I'm going to get it down to a rumble, inshallah. I just need give me about 2 months of practice or just a good pepperoni pizza. All right, so this I did not know about. I was unaware that Madagascar had a group of people that fled from Greek captivity. I was unaware of that. I'd be interested to know more about them and what language they speak in comparison to the rest of the country, if it's even any different. They may now speak the same language as everyone else. Now, to get back to Nameless Protagonist, intersectional feminism and colonial liberalism are the enemies. They absolutely are. They go hand in hand with white supremacy and the IDNS culture. They go right hand in hand with them. These things come together. So we absolutely do need to be, those of us who cannot leave, they need to help set up something that's like, a transitional community, I should say. Because the alternative does need to be a transition to leaving. But those of us that do go abroad, you're right. We do need to be willing to help the men in these societies to vaccinate themselves before the infection of intersectional feminism and colonial liberalism really take hold. Now, these things are there. But right now, you don't find somebody that knows all about intersectionality. Right where I live, you got Nasawiya, which is feminism, but they don't fully know about intersectionalism yet. It's coming. And I'm trying to inoculate the men here. The problem is that where I live, these guys are Bedouins. I have a hard time telling them a complete sentence. Not because they think I'm stupid per se, but it's just that they're so excited to talk a lot of times, they don't let you finish a sentence. And if you don't speak Arabic, their dialect, their accent as fast as they do, you can't get the information out to them because you can't finish the sentence. But yeah, I'm trying my best because you know what? These guys, man, these guys that live here, they're not bad guys. These men are not bad. A lot of you've heard, the Arabs hate black people, and there are things I got to tell them at times. Sometimes I got to tell them, watch your mouth, but it's not hateful. What they say, it's arrogant. I mean, it's ignorant. It's that subconscious white supremacy they have, the kind that's not violent or hateful. They were just as angry as you were about George Floyd. Absolutely. They were even angrier. Because they didn't care about his previous felonies. They said he was not committing any dangerous crime at the time. He was not supposed to be killed. But the thing I'm getting at is that when I try to tell them about this Nasawiya, this feminism that's coming, I try to tell them what's going to happen because I want them to be inoculated ahead of time. I know what Nameless is talking about. We know what to tell the men, but see, this is where language comes in. You're going to have to be able to tell these men at least partially in their own language. Some of us might think, well, we're not really ready to get all buddy-buddy with these dudes. No, bro. When you go and you migrate to these areas, the men take them as buddies. Because then you can inoculate them. This is better for them and us. To be honest with you, it's even better for their women. And it's better for the women that we're leaving behind in the West, the feminists, the hyenas. You know why? Because if the hyenas have their way, they're going to tell all the women of the world about not just feminism, but militant feminism, misandry. How to make the man unhappy and miserable, like he deserves because he's a guy and he's got a penis and he might enjoy sex before you do. You know, that's that mindset they've got in their subconscious. They would tell them that, but they would also say, come here where you're free. And if you don't like your husband, you can leave him and take the money and keep the kids. And you don't have to bend over for him and drain his testes, but he still has to take care of you. They forget to mention that when the child support runs out, it's over. So what happens if these women actually followed what these wicked witches of the West told them? What do you think would happen? Well, they would go to the UK, the US, Canada. Now, granted, they can't all go to the US just because they want to. But can they go to either the US or Canada or the UK or Holland or Germany or France or Spain or Portugal or either one of the Scandinavian countries, which are 4 or 5, add them all up together, or Australia or New Zealand? Now, can they all go to one or the other of those many countries because they want to? The chances increase. Because remember, it's not just America. Now, if these ladies give up what they have to go to these first world nations with the militant feminism, they're going to wind up old and lonely themselves. And when they realize they've been lied to, what do you think they're going to do to the women from the West where they moved, where they now live? They told them, come over here. What do you think's going to happen? You're going to have a lot of women, feminists, but with accents, beating up on the native-born Western women. You lied to me, you B-word. You told me it was going to be easy. You didn't tell me I was going to be alone. But the alimony. He killed himself. There's no more alimony. Now, I went on mute just now because I sneezed. Sorry about that. But this is a good question from Abdullah. Now, Abdullah, what I would say is this. See, for you and I, we have an entire way of life in our religion. As people like to say, it's not just a religion, it's an entire way of life. So you and I have an answer. We have the answer. To those who don't believe that this answer is the answer, I would say to them, come up with the best you can. I've already stated what the solution is for Black folks in general, really for anybody that's been oppressed. I've explained what that is. But at the very least, even though everybody ain't going to accept our premise that Islam is the answer, and I get it, you want to see it. I understand that. But if they're not going to, then they're going to have to come up with the most morally upright revolution that they can and see how that works. To be honest with you, if that's what anybody tries to do, they're going to wind up coming to our doorstep saying, hey, you got the solution. Tell me more about it. Give me more details, because what I do know does work, and we won't be able to stop them, Abdullah. So right now, the ones that don't believe. But in all honesty, if they're trying to come up with a moral revolution, they'll eventually come to see us, and we won't be able to stop them. We wouldn't be able to convince them to not believe and join us at that point. I've seen that happen myself. When somebody is having a moral revolution internally and they want to externalize it, they wind up with us, and we can't stop them. We can't force them to believe. We can't stop them from believing when they get convinced. But now let's see here. All right, A. LaRue is showing us what happens. The reason why this was able to happen. The reason this was able to happen is because of the feminist, the misandrist a lot of them being sisters, because understand, when it comes to the footwork, the feminists tend to sit back and let the sisters do the footwork for them. Did y'all know that? Feminists of various races tend to let the sisters do their work for them because, frankly, sisters really believe in feminism so much that when they're not feminists, they're still feminist. That's how much they believe in it. We strong, we independent because we're black. They don't say it's because they're feminists. Sisters don't say that. They say because they're black women, they're strong and independent with a capital K. Strong and 4 A's in the middle. Strong and independent. They think it comes from their blackness, not feminism. So they do the footwork. Did y'all know that? Did y'all know that a lot of Arab women that are feminists are not imitating white feminists? They might listen to them, but they actually, to a certain extent, imitate black feminists. And this is what happened here in Brazil, whether it was a black or white feminist that gave this white Brazilian the idea. The point is that militancy and that zeal that we black folks tend to bring to whatever it is we believe made its way to her. So she calls him an SEX. She calls him a 6 tourist. You know, the number that comes after number 5? Yeah, that one. She calls him that kind of tourist because they're busy spreading this stuff. That's what I wanted you all to understand. So we have to create this alternative because right now there is a good and bad reputation that we enjoy as black men. It's both. They don't fully know what to make of us. We can show them. That's what this is about. All right. This is what I was trying to get at too. We won't be able to save the hood. What we're doing is we're creating an alternative, a transition through which individuals exposed to hood culture or taught hood culture can save themselves. This is what we're doing. This is what I'm talking about. And this is actually what you're doing. You guys in my audience, you're a part of this effort already. I'm only asking you to be more aware of it and to spread the idea and this is really me drumming up business for myself, to be honest with you, because when the t-shirts come, it's somebody else that's going to collect. It's not going to be me. But to spread the idea that we need to start looking for ways to recognize each other on sight. I got the ideas and I'm gonna give them to somebody else. I'm going to give them to somebody else and let him collect for it. But we do have to do this. We have to start, one, being aware that we're creating an alternative. We got to be more aggressive about it, though, even in person. And this is something, don't think that because I'm away from the States, I don't have that burden of being aggressive against it in person. I do, because I see these boys here walking around, not just with the caps turned backwards. Now, they're not sagging their pants yet when they're wearing pants. It's not that. But I see them sometimes with the sag, with the pants turned, with the caps turned backwards. And I see them sometimes, if they hear me talking on the phone in English, then they start with the hand gestures like they're trying to rap. Yeah, my nigga. And I have to tell them, hey, man, if you use that word, that's an insult. And they really don't know. They think it's funny, but they don't know it's an insult. I have to tell them it's the same thing as when white people call you the T word. And I don't mean tourist either. Off, really? Yeah. Use that word again. Use that N word again. See, that's when they get it. So what I'm saying is that it's on me too. When I say we got to be aggressive against this IDNS culture, it's on me as well. Because I got to tell my students, and now I don't have students, but I got to tell my students and other young folks periodically that recognize me from classes that this stuff is not true. That when they see someone like me and I'm over here, obviously I'm against that stuff. That the real gangsters don't get passports. And that if they even could fill out the application form to get the passport, they'd be laughed at by their homies. That's what I got to tell them. See, it's one thing when they ask if I know how to rap because they like poetry. But it's something else when just because I'm black and bald-headed and I'm American, they think I used to rap with Tupac and that we used to gangbang together. But that's what the IDNS culture's done. And we got to also understand that the IDNS culture is not something that we're responsible for spreading. Because even when the worst actors on TV took these stereotypical roles, do you think they did this knowing that they were eventually going to be broadcast globally? Absolutely not. Boys in the Hood was not made or filmed for an international audience, but it's international. Did you know that? The Woman King is in movie theaters right here in Saudi Arabia. I was just in the mall with the movie theater earlier today. I didn't go to that, but I'm saying that it's there. Black Panther was the first film released in Saudi Arabia ever. Because the release of that film was right after, a few days after movie theaters were legalized as a business here. So the good and the bad that we put on screen is now broadcast globally. But the funny thing is that the bad from the 1980s and 1990s is still here. So we got work to do, gentlemen. Not just to make other people like us, but really just to create a scenario in which we move around easily. Not just legally, but socially. Now this here, I want y'all to pay attention to that. They want you to trick, but then also shame you. NB, you were on to something, man. I, of course, have to view tricking as a shameful act. I have to. It's nothing personal. It's just the rules of my faith. It's like that for anybody. Doesn't matter when it comes down to tricking or any kind of fornication. To us as Muslims, it doesn't matter if you travel to do it or if you just walk next door to do it. I do want you to be able to have families, stable families too, loving families. I want this for you. Preferably with 2 wives, even if you're Christian. You show me where Jesus, in your scripture, you show me where Jesus said that that's not allowed. But see, what I'm getting at here is that they want you to do whatever they're going to shame you for anyway. See, he's on to something. I'm going to explain it. They want you to trick so that they can shame you. The conjunction is the only thing that's missing. What's going on, Michael Miller? Michael is one of my Patreon supporters too. So I want to give a shout out to him. Now, some other Patreon supporters might be in here. Yes, there's one other that's in here, I believe. So I want to give a shout out to both of them. Some Patreon supporters may have a different name on YouTube than on Patreon. So I apologize if I don't single some of you out in here because I may not know you're the same person. But believe me, I appreciate all 7 of my Patreon supporters. Let me double check, make sure it's still that, because the numbers, when it goes up, I don't always know about it. All right. So that's what I wanted you guys to understand, that the conjunction between they want you to trick and then shaming you is the only thing that I would have written differently if I was NB. And I'm not blaming you, NB. You stated it correctly. I just have a habit of understanding because I'm a pessimist, which I don't want to see people become. But because I'm pessimistic, I would know that the conjunction between them is actually they want you to trick so that they can shame you. You got to understand that that hood and the hood culture, that's not just in the hood by itself. Hood culture follows us around wherever we are. As I stated in the beginning of this live stream, I grew up Huxtable. And in my Huxtable neighborhood, hood culture followed us around through the mechanisms of guilt and negative stereotypes. You see, in hood culture, with the sisters running it, the hyenocracy running it, they want to criticize you, so they want you to do the things that are blameworthy. That's what it comes down to. That's what I wanted you guys to realize and understand. This is necessary for you to realize that they're looking for you because they're your enemies. They're not just brainwashed against you. That's true that they are, but it's not just that. They hate you. They hate you deeply with everything that they got. And that's why they want you to do the things they're going to shame you for later. Why is it that they are now trying to say that you're a bunch of sick tourists of a sick nature, that you're going over there for those who haven't yet quite reached the age of that sort of below the belt awareness? Because that's what they want you to do. And since you won't do it, because most of us ain't that way, most human beings are not that way anyway, and we know we're not going to get away with breaking any laws abroad. So we're not going to travel to do it. Y'all remember DP I told y'all about, the victim that became the aggressor? DP did it in his driveway, in his parents' carport. That's where he committed the crime. He didn't travel to do it. What I also wanted you to understand is that you and I understand that when we travel, if we break laws, we're going to get it as bad as a white American or worse, but we're not going to get it any better. So why would any of us travel to a third world country to break laws that are outrageous, morally outrageous in any culture and society? Unacceptable. We instinctively know, every human being instinctively knows that that's wrong. Why would we travel to third world countries with third world prisons waiting on us to do stuff like that? It doesn't make sense. The accusation that the hyenas make is illogical. If you're going to do something like that, you're going to go to Norway or another Scandinavian country where you like to live in their prisons. Matter of fact, if you run out of money, but you're too old to work, what you going to do? You're going to catch a flight, go over there and tell customs that you committed a crime. Because in their prisons, you're going to be well looked after, taken care of. It's a retirement home you can't leave. That's their prisons. Sisters are blaming you for outrageous things because they want you to do those things so that they could shame you. And since you won't do it, they're going to shame you anyway. Sorry I took so long to get to that point, but that's what they're doing. That's right, what I see. They don't respect us. They hate us. Absolutely. I don't know how long that hatred's been. I don't know exactly when it started. But some people say that the contempt was there in Daughters of the Trade. And that was basically what the 16 or 1700s in which she started, that the author began to discuss that. That she discussed it from, what century did she begin talking about? Anybody that read that book? Did she discuss from the 1300s onward or the 1700s onward? If anyone knows, tell us, please. The point is that the contempt has been there for a long time. Exactly. They're projecting because they will do something like that. Maybe not someone underage per se. I give sisters credit. If they're going to do something like that, they won't travel for it. I'm not saying they well, actually, no. I take that back. Somebody actually did say that in some locations, they didn't care about age. Forgot about that. Someone did say that. They are the tourist, the sixth tourist. Absolutely, they are. Because they were going to Jamaica before we black men even thought it was okay to have a passport. By the way, gentlemen, I can feel a sneeze coming on, so I'm going to go on mute for a second. But after that, I'm going to tell y'all an interesting story about how this passport thing got started. And I'm going to give y'all some telling biographical information about myself. Give me a moment. All right. Sorry about that, gentlemen. Yeah, that sneeze, I'm glad that I put it on mute because I think I probably would have blown the microphone out if I didn't. Yep, How Stella Got Her Groove Back was written 2 years before the movie came out. Well, it was released 2 years before the book was released 2 years before the movie. Oh, and here's the funny thing. Hey, you guys remember that movie, She's Gotta Have It? When Spike Lee had the actresses just talking in general, free chatting about men, and somebody said something about going to Africa and get an African man, and someone said, that's right, Zulu dick all the way down to the knees. In the bush. Remember when they were saying that? Raise your hand or put a 1 in if you can remember that scene from She's Gotta Have It. If y'all can remember that, put a 1 in the chat. I'm not sure if is my mic still working, guys? Okay, George Goldman put a 1 in. So he remembers that. I think it was She's Gotta Have It. I think that was the name of the movie. Maybe it was from Jungle Fever instead. Maybe that's where it was from. All right. I could be wrong. Yeah, Red Falls Black. I just saw what you wrote. Yes, maybe that was. I think you're right and I was wrong. I think I'm the one that's got it wrong. Jungle Fever. All right, and so nameless protagonist answered the question. She picked up in the 1600s and focused on the Dutch company in particular. Okay, and Mwata Chiguka, thank you for setting me straight. It was Jungle Fever. That's right, because She's Gotta Have It was filmed in black and white. That scene was in color. Okay, yeah, Minister Knapp showed that clip. By the way, Minister Knapp is part of the reason I had to record this about damn IDNS culture. Because he's entirely too old, as I stated in my previous recording about my previous upload about this. Entirely too old to be bragging about bitten gitches and street credibility. Matter of fact, 16 years is too old to be bragging about bitten gitches. And I'm using a spoonerism to not curse, but might as well go ahead and say it, but I'm not going to. I'm gonna try to avoid that this time. But 16 years old is too old to be bragging about succeeding with broken black Western women, or white Western women for that matter. Because they're broken. It's like bragging about being able to work a broken vending machine. I mean, okay, you got money, you can go to one that's not broken. You can go to one that works, put the right change in. So in any case, in that scene, they were talking about going abroad, right? Even there, going back to Africa, just because they expect those men to have bigger trunks. Maybe they do. I guess it depends on which part of the continent you go to. Point is, they've always felt that. But I told you all I was going to tell you how this passport thing really got started. You want to know how? If this live stream has been boring and you've been patient with me, and I thank you for that. If it's been boring, it's about to get interesting now. I'm going to tell you where I went to college. I went to Morehouse. That's some biographical information that somebody would probably turn around and use to try to dox me later. I'm not going to say which years I went, but what I will say is that I do know when. I know that the newspaper back then was named the Maroon Tiger, and it might still be named the Maroon Tiger. I could look that up on the net, but I'm lazy. At Morehouse College, that's what changed my world. That actually was the alternative to IDNS culture. Now, that was, to a certain extent, IDNS culture, some of it was there, some of it. Let me tell you what happened though. We might listen to the music and groove to it, but if you were bringing that IDNS stuff with you from high school, you did not make it past the first semester. And if you made it past the first semester, then you still had more to get rid of to make it past the second semester. Morehouse, as you guys know, is within walking distance across the street from Spelman. But the classes, the academic study hours, were largely just us bros. If you want a fraternity into which you don't have to be hazed, Morehouse is it. You can pledge a frat if you want to, but Morehouse itself is a fraternity. Absolutely it is. We have our hand sign. We have certain things that we don't tell others. I believe it was 1997. It might have been 98, but I believe it was 1997. The Morehouse Business Club took a trip to two countries, and I think one of them was Brazil. This is what happened. In Brazil, somebody wrote an article when they got back from that business trip. They took that trip during spring break. And then when the school year ended, actually, I'm sorry, right before the school year ended, another edition of the newspaper came out. One of the guys, the one that wrote the article, stated, remember, this is 97, maybe 98 if I'm wrong. When did the movie Stella Got Her Groove Back come out? I think that was 1996 if I'm not mistaken. So 1997, the author of this of the article in the Maroon Tiger said, when I have attempted to pair bond with any of the Spelman women, it's been that BS, that sure bit. It's always like that. What's going on, Black Agent? Black Agent, let me ask you this. Did you see something on a particular app when you woke up? Let me know if you see it. You don't have to say what app it is, but just let me know if you saw something. Let me know if you saw that my attempt to be fair. That's as much as I'll say. By the way, y'all, Black Agent is the one with whom I'm in conference. He in turn, okay, excellent, you saw it. Black Agent in turn is in conference with an artist to try to arrange some t-shirts and some golf shirts for you guys. Now, the artist is a very private person, so I respect that privacy. But Black Agent is the one that's in conference with him. And so you can check his channel from time to time, look for any announcements, I should say, because he and I both will probably announce when they become available for you. He's working with the artist to get the designs in. One for Passport Bros, another for Passport Gang, another for SYSBM, another one probably for IBMO. I don't know if IBMOR is going to be on the case or not. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he would not stop you, Black Agent. Ain't nobody black enough to stop you anyway, Obama or anybody else. So in any case, he wrote this article, and what he said was, he said, I'm a member of the business association, Morehouse Business Association. That was for business majors. I was one of those that took the trip to Brazil. While there, we learned what's going on. Detroit 313, welcome, sir, welcome. And he said, the author of that article said, while there, something happened. After having to deal with you Black American women, especially you Spelmanites, with your up attitudes and your predilection for guys that should have no business with you, the thugs. He called this. He said to them, after dealing with you all, trying to do my part, because we're supposed to get together and marry and make these families, what did I find in Brazil? That Black women in Brazil, one, they're common. Number two, they're gorgeous. Number three, their attitudes are far better. This author, whose name I can't remember, I don't think he gave his name, actually. I believe he wrote this anonymously. This author he went on to tell all the readers. He said, the Black Brazilian women look up to Black American men, especially nice guys. They call us carinhosas, and they actually prefer us over the swaggerillas. He didn't use the term swaggerilla. What he stated was, the thug ain't gonna get with the nice girl. Now there might be a ratchet hood rat for him too, but that's not that's all he's gonna match up with. He's not gonna get the Brazilian version of the Spelmanite. Did y'all hear me? Gentlemen, 1997 or 98, just in case my memory's bad, an author in the Maroon Tiger wrote this article, and it made waves. The only reason it didn't make a bigger shock was because that issue came out right before the end of the school year. A few days after it came out, I remember we started final exams. Everybody had the book. But when I was in the cafeteria and people were chatting, and as the finals began to wind down and some people had finished all their finals, that was the talk of the courtyard and the cafeteria. Now, I was a young cat. I was not done yet. My cousin, I got a few cousins that live in Atlanta, few of them, on both sides of my family. Mostly my mother's side, though. One of my maternal cousins, older than me, was already a successful practicing doctor by this point. Do you know that mind you, he was a Morehouse student himself when he was an undergrad. And then he went to Meharry Medical. But by this point, he was already practicing medicine. But he was in touch with a lot of Morehouse grads, his contemporaries in Atlanta and outside of Atlanta. This made news not just amongst Morehouse students at the time, referred to as men of Morehouse, but it made news amongst Morehouse men. That means the alumni. They started traveling. My cousin was among the first wave of those that traveled to Brazil. My maternal cousin. He was one of the first He went with some others. He went with a few friends at first. Then he got comfortable enough to where he was going by himself. He would go to Rio to party, and he eventually began to go to Rio and Salvador to get some history, some culture. Now, when I first started talking about going back to Africa, he got worried. He was scared. Do you know what renewed his pride in blackness? He started going to Brazil and meeting black Brazilians. He found out they looked up to us, for one, and he found that the women would spoil him rotten, the ones that you pay for play and the ones you don't. I don't recommend fornication. I'm telling you, I don't say that sort of thing is okay. This cousin of mine is not Muslim. But what he did see, and he said, what he saw and told us about was that whether you pay her or whether you're just a friend of hers, or whether you're dating her, or whether you try to marry her, if as long as you're not a bad person to her, they're good to you and they spoil you. He said the thing is that they're just genuinely nice women, even when you have to pay them. He said that American women had no chance with him again. He does not want to get married. I wish he would. He does not want to because of his experiences. And he said he can't make money over there doing what he does. He has to work in the States to make his living. Otherwise, he'd go there and he'd marry. Then something else happened. He started to go to the Dominican Republic because the trips were not quite as long. So the DR, he said it was the same thing. Before, a bunch of simps went and ruined Sosua the way that people complain about. I've never been to the DR or Brazil, but people have said that Sosua is ruined. But before it was, before anybody even talked about it, he went to the DR. He took my brother. My brother wasn't going to pay to play, find him a girlfriend there. I said you shouldn't, but the point is that my brother even said, even though I was just a visitor, I'm always going to miss the DR because not only was it a good place to visit, but also because the people were nice, including attractive women. My brother told me this a few weeks before I got married to the lady in Morocco. Then I saw it. I remember this. My brother told me this. We were swimming in the pool. My brother told me about this. Now, I don't know when he traveled there, but he told me about this in 2015, summer of 2015. A few weeks later, I was in Morocco meeting the family of my ex, and then marrying her. And I can tell you that I saw it my own self. First few hours that we were married, I saw it. I didn't know that she had done my laundry for me. I was unaware of that. Did y'all know? Some of you have told this story, some of you have not. The first evening of our marriage, before we consummated, of course, I looked at the suitcase she brought, and she pulled a bag out. Half the suitcase was the bag, and that was my dirty laundry. I had asked where I could get my laundry done and what was the normal price because I didn't want them to lie to me about the price because I'm not Moroccan. They asked me to hand them the laundry bags. I did. I said, okay, well, whatever they charge, tell me, because they're not going to overcharge you. And they said, what? Man, don't insult us like that. What you talking about? She did the laundry, dried it, ironed it, and folded it. I didn't know this until we went to the apartment where we were going to stay. That was when I found out. Can you imagine that, gentlemen? So I saw this a few weeks after my brother told me what he experienced, but he experienced it because he traveled with my cousin who had heard about this article. Now, that article, 1997, eventually made an effect. It had ripples. Everybody doesn't know about that newspaper article from the Morehouse Maroon Tiger. But we see the effects today, don't we, gentlemen? We are here now. I'm doing this live stream. You're part of the audience because of the effects of that article that was written by an anonymous author. And my cousin was one of the first ones. He was in that first wave to go ahead and put that to the test. That's in the late 90s to early 2000s, he actually started making the trips. And as he met these black folks in Latin America, including Brazil, I'm counting that as a part of Latin America, even though they speak Portuguese. As he met these Afro-Latinos and African Brazilians, they were proud of being black and being from Africa. And he saw this and he said, wow, you know what? Maybe Black Mind wasn't so crazy for talking about going back to Africa. I just don't want him going back to just anywhere by himself, not knowing what he's doing. But I understand what he's getting at. See, my cousin, he resembles a Sudanese. When he went to Costa Rica, he was sitting in a restaurant/bar. He said that a Costa Riqueña, or a tica as they call them, that means a Costa Rican lady, a black tica, came in, saw him, gave him the head nod, and came to him and said, are you visiting, or are you from here? Or did you just move here? And he said, I just got here today, I'm visiting. And then she said, has anybody told you where we hang out? And then he said, no, they haven't. And she said, I'll show you. Then he asked her, but when you say we, who exactly do you mean? And she looked him up and down and said, Africans. She didn't even say black folks. She said Africans. She knew he wasn't from Costa Rica as soon as he spoke. She knew he wasn't even a native Spanish speaker as soon as he spoke. She knew he wasn't from the continent directly. So what I'm getting at is that when you travel, there's a whole world that opens up, and you begin to understand that black folks are not natural enemies to each other. We think we are, but we're not. We're not one united race. We're also not a bunch of bickering tribes either. Neither extreme is correct. So my cousin saw several things when he began to travel. And so when he took my brother, he wasn't taking my brother so that my brother could just pay to play. My brother and I both were grown by this point, but he knew that I'd probably fight my brother for something like that. He knew this. I was in no physical shape to whoop my brother's behind when he told me about the experience in the Dominican Republic. That's why we were swimming. It was part of a recovery for me. But the point is that my brother went ahead and told me about this, largely to say that he could understand why I was considering marrying someone that was not only not American, but not Western, and not even an English speaker. That's what he was getting at to me. And all of this because of one anonymous article written in 1997 or 1998, spring/summer, around that time, telling Spelmanite women and Morehouse men that Brazil had changed his understanding and that he was not going to be approaching American sisters again, starting with Spelmanites. Now, that was a pretty big thing because typically speaking, Spelmanite women, sorry, why did I say that? Spelmanite women and Morehouse men are expected to marry. What is expected? I didn't have the option to marry a Spelmanite woman, to be honest with you. Simply didn't have that option. It's not because I was too ugly. I just wasn't dark enough. By the time that didn't matter anymore, that was around the time we start looking at graduation. By the time that no longer mattered, the problem still was that they had more experience than I did, and they knew it. And I thought it was just me. Turns out, to a lesser extent, this happened across the board. So now I understand why it was. It was Morehouse guys that started this. I was a man of Morehouse at the time it got started. I didn't know what it was going to become. And this is my first time telling anybody through this channel that I actually went to Morehouse. I told you all about how I took classes with Morehouse men when I was in college in Atlanta. I did because, well, with men of Morehouse, with Morehouse students, I did because I was there. I just didn't say that that's where I went to school, but that's where I went. I matriculated there, and I saw it. But looking back, I should have expected that this was going to become a big thing because, see, Morehouse men are not like everyone. One, admission standards do make some distinctions. Secondly, the distinctions are further enhanced as you matriculate through it. See, that IDNS stuff don't work. Most of us don't like white women. Most Morehouse guys, men of Morehouse or Morehouse men, don't want nothing to do with no white woman. We look at them and we see them as the first ones to do the false accusation thing. That's how we see it. We learn history at Morehouse. I was a man of Morehouse when I started learning Amharic. Now let's all think back to high school. You start learning an African language. And your boys find out. What's their reaction? At Morehouse, you start learning an African language and your boys find out. They say, I'm going with you to the next class and teach me what you've learned so far so that the teacher does not get frustrated with me being behind. Me being behind. Catch me up. So now you got to study for your classes. Then you got to make time to teach this negus, not niggas, but to teach this negus, which you know, not because you're the expert, but just to catch him up so that when you go for your next lesson and he comes along, he's up to speed so he don't hold the teacher back. That's what happens in Morehouse. So when I'm talking about this alternative, I've already seen it. It was Morehouse. To tell the truth, Black Agent, I learned about I learned about a third of the language. Now, there's somebody that you know that was a witness to this. Yeah, somebody that you know witnessed this. She was present about 2 times when I was with some Amharic speakers in Atlanta. And she could vouch. The thing is, you have to figure out who she is, because I'm not going to say her name right here, of course. But yeah, she saw it. She saw it. She witnessed it. About a third of the language. I've forgotten a large chunk of it, but when I was with last time that I was in the U.S. I'm sorry, no, the second to last time I was in the United States, I had to use Amharic, and it began to come back to me, what I'd forgotten. But I only learned up to about a third of it. I was never completely fluent. But Amharic is actually easier to pronounce for me than Arabic is, to be honest. I can speak more Arabic than I can Amharic, but when I speak Amharic speakers think that I can say everything because the pronunciation is not that hard for me, whereas Arabic is. So in any case, that's what happens in Morehouse. The thing is this, guys, because some of you would say, well, you know what, why don't you just go ahead and suggest Morehouse then? Well, the thing is that Morehouse is expensive. I do want everyone to be able to have that experience that I had, as long as their minds are ready for it. Now, in Morehouse, your mind has to be ready, and then your parents got to be able to afford it. If they can't, it's worth it. I always thank Allah that He never subjected my dad to poverty during my lifetime. I'm grateful to Allah for that. Unfortunately, nowadays we can't afford that. Most of us can't. But what I want us to realize, though, is that now we have, through social media, the benefit of like minds who don't have to dish out that much money to go to Morehouse to find the environment. You're trying to create it already. You and my audience are trying to do it. Some of you probably went to Morehouse already. But you're now coming with this environment, and there's even something better. Because see, in Morehouse, that academic environment, which is good, is still tainted. It's tainted by corruption. There are people that are corrupt. A lot of them are actually preachers. And they take bribes. They cool, they're entertaining, and they're intelligent, but they take bribes. And a lot of them who go through Morehouse and then go through the ITC after Morehouse to finish their religious education, a lot of them don't believe in the doctrine they're preaching. That's the truth of the matter. Some of them will tell you, yeah, Doc, I preach at this church out in the country. Oh, okay, cool. But yeah, Doc, I mean, I became a Mason and I learned a lot of history. Everything in the Bible ain't true. Oh, well, I mean, I don't believe everything in the Bible is true, but I'm Muslim. But you have a preacher telling you this. That's one of the downsides to it. There's one other thing too. And there's a little bit of elitism in Morehouse. We don't need elitism. What we need is simply an appreciation for knowledge and upright moral character. That's what we need. No anti-intellectualism and no anti-morality. Man, I've been preaching for 2 hours and 14 minutes. I'm sorry, guys. But you see, this is what it is that you have to face when you're at Morehouse. You finally get a break. You get the freedom from the IDNS culture. Oh, man, the pro-intellectualism is there. The respect for knowledge is there, and there is a morality that pervades, but then there's a corruption in the morality because, see, for one, most of us don't agree that men should act like women. Now, on one hand, we're not out here looking and asking other men what they do in their bedrooms and with whom they're doing it. We don't really ask that stuff. We don't pry, but we don't believe that men should be out in public acting like women or vice versa. Unfortunately, at Morehouse, that was being pressed more and more. It was being promoted more and more, and that tainted things for those who believe that men should not imitate women or vice versa. There's another thing I wanted to tell you guys. At Morehouse, there were some basketball players that were there on athletic scholarship. And there came a time when a family friend went to Spelman. I remember her. She was the cousin of a family friend, I would say. She accused some of the basketball players of violating her. The struggle. I'm sorry, the struggle snuggle. Why did I say snuggle? The struggle snuggle. She accused them of this. She said about, I think it was 3 or 4 of them. I was a student at that point in time. Some of y'all might remember the story. I initially took her word. I later on learned she lied and she admitted to it. These guys were booked, they were charged, and then they were bailed. So they were out on bail until the trial. But because of the investigation, she couldn't keep her story straight. And then later on, she was found hiding in another male student's closet after visitation hours. And I remember that one of the Christians came to me and said, "Hey, yo, Black, the Holy Spirit told me that girl's contemplating suicide. She's about to go to hell. I need you to tell me who she is so I can minister to her." I kid you not. Because he knew that I was a family friend, and I wasn't going to give her name. And I said, why is she committing suicide? You didn't know? No, what? She was found again hiding in somebody's closet after visitation hours, and she was only wearing her panties. Her story fell apart. Before this happened, I didn't know that sisters falsely accused brothers like this. I heard stories about women doing this in general, but I didn't know that they just went and falsely accused brothers like this. And truth be told, I saw her years later in an elevator in one of the hotels in Atlanta. I don't think she recognized me. I didn't say anything to her. She got in the elevator, she was talking to someone, and I got silent. I didn't even say anything. But she got out of the elevator eventually. And I know that she saw me. I just don't know if she recognized me. I'm hoping she did not. But it brought back a lot of memories for me. You see, here's the thing though, at Morehouse, when these guys got accused, we all had an agreement. And that agreement was when people ask us for a comment, when news crews would show up on campus and ask us what we thought, we were to say, we're going to wait for the investigation and the trial. We are not going to assume that these guys are guilty or innocent and we don't know what happened. We all had this agreement. You go in most black environments, that's not what happens. That's not the way they do it. Yeah, man, they did X, Y, and Z. No, bro, she lying. And it's an argument, and that's what it is. We had an agreement. We will not make statements to the press, and we will not argue about this sort of thing publicly. We were all under agreement. If we're going to debate about this, it's going to be in private in a dorm room, and no non-Morehouse alumni or non-students will be present for that. This was an agreement that we all had. I remember the meeting. All the students were called to it, except the ones that lived off campus. And that meeting did not take more than 20 minutes. And that's from the time the meeting was scheduled. It got started late. When the meeting started, it certainly didn't take 20 minutes, because 20 minutes after the meeting was scheduled to start, it was over. It started late. That's because the intellect is there. The ability to listen before you just assume what the person's going to say for the rest of their sentence and interrupt is there. How to debate is taught to the students there. Debate without just arguing. How to not fight. That was there. It may have deteriorated since then. I've been going a long time, but I would say this. I don't know, to answer your question, Abdullah, I don't know an HBCU actually that has any religious curriculum outside of maybe some Black Christian colleges. I mean, Xavier University is I think it's the only Catholic HBCU. I know they got a Catholic curriculum. I don't think they stress it that much, but as far as any non-Christian curriculum at HBCU, no. I don't know of one. Not sure. I mean, you know what? Actually, maybe Ahmadu Bello University in Nigeria. Maybe. Okay. Maybe this would help, but that's not an HBCU, definitely. And I'm not going to lie. The Qataris are not pro-Black. They're not anti-Black either, but they're brainwashed. Maybe it's gotten better. I think it's gotten better since then, because Qatar's population is very small, and they got there's one guy in Qatar who does his social media show, and one of the things he's attacked is racism. Because Qatar has freedom of speech, unlike the other nations around here. There's certain things I can't say or I'd get arrested within an hour here. They're illegal to say. Anybody would get arrested. It's not just me. But in Qatar, they do have freedom of speech. So there's one guy, I forgot his name. I think it's Ansari is his name. Ansari. Maybe it's Ahmed Ansari. Now, he has opposed this sort of thing, and he's popular. So he didn't lose any popularity when he went against this. But they're not pro-Black either. Maybe that's changing too. I haven't been to Qatar yet. So that being said, gentlemen, there's something that I got to go and do. But I want to thank each and every last one of you guys from the bottom of my black heart and the depths of my black mind. And I mean that because, frankly, gentlemen, y'all came through. Y'all really did. And um, yeah, y'all really came through. And so I'm probably going to be doing this more often and have some panels as well. Until I start teaching again, I'll probably be doing this darn near full time. I'd say probably about every other day. But what I will do is this: before, like today, before I do go live, I'm going to try to put up a notice far ahead of time before I do it. One other thing, gentlemen, if I may. Um, Tomorrow, there is a man from Jamaica that agreed to come on. That would probably be about an hour after now, but tomorrow. So an hour after right now, but on tomorrow, he agreed to come on and to talk about uh, his particular country. It's a country in the Americas, and the culture there is shot. And the anti-intellectualism and the ethnic ethos is strong there. And we're going to talk about it because most of you in the audience are still in the US. Some of you have traveled and you will again. Some of you are traveling now. Some of you have not yet traveled and you want information on what different places are like. And he's going to give you information on a particular place to which you would not want to travel unless it's strictly going to be for its weather or its environment, but it's not going to be a cultural experience for you. And he'll let you know about this tomorrow, inshallah. I really, really do appreciate you guys being patient with me. And yeah, us. Thank you, Simeon. Thank you, George Golden. I mean that. Thank you, nameless protagonist. Um, and A. LaRue, yes. Uh, you're going to be vindicated tomorrow. Yeah, you're going to be vindicated tomorrow. And if he runs out of things to say, then I may open up the panel tomorrow so that people can tell us a little bit more. So that this way, those of you that have yet to travel or that want to know more about more places, you will understand at least where not to go and how to know where not to go, what these areas have in common. Because one of the first steps to finding out where you should go individually, the first step is finding out where nobody of your like mind should go, where anyone of your like mind should not go. And maybe one day, inshallah, we'll have a discussion about this particular thing right here that's on the screen from Abdullah Amriki. Because the bond between not only Africa and ADOS, but between the continent and the rest of the diaspora, well, the continent and its diaspora across the ocean, could that be strengthened? I did say that I was going to tell y'all something about hip hop before I go. So I'm going to keep that promise before I sign out. I'm not going to argue about hip hop or rap. Oh yeah, Abdullah Mariki. I'm gonna put the email. I've mentioned this before, but I'm gonna put the email address in the chat for you right now. Okay, so in a few seconds it should show up, and I'll make sure that it does. Hold on. Okay, yeah. And thanks a million about the job prospects. Make dua. Because there's a final salary payment that's still owed to me. So make dua that they're quick with that and that the job prospects do get better. I have to turn down certain things now because these are jobs nobody can keep. This time of year, people will offer you gigs, but they'll be in places that you should not go if you want to keep your job. They'll put you in some of the worst areas. All right, let's see here. All right, so Nameless, I'm going to have to take a look at yours then. Inshallah, I have to take a look at yours. If you can give me the name of the podcast, then I'll go to it.
So the last thing I'm gonna tell y'all about hip hop is that even though I'm not really endorsing or opposing it, I mean, I'm all for lyrics and I like drums, but unfortunately, music leads to a lot of debates amongst my religious community. But since the debate is about who started hip hop and rap, was it ADOS or was it non-ADOS? Let me put it like this. It was the diaspora that started it. It was started in the US by FBA and Caribbean folks together that put this together. It was developed over time by both. Two things can be true at one time. It is an African art form that took its current exact form in the Americas, specifically in the US, by being developed by Africans from the US and by Africans of the Caribbean islands. That's the origin as to how it got started. That's what it is. The reason I mention that is because the debate and the way that that debate happened was largely due to the anti-intellectualism of both. That's where that came about. But in all honesty, I cannot sit up here and defend either one. I cannot sit up and defend either one, the Caribbean or FBA, if we're going to have an anti-intellectual attitude and some idness business. Now, what happens is that many people from the islands that move to the United States are not idness. And all I ask that they do is not pretend like nobody back home on their particular islands is an idness. They left a bunch of them behind. They left an islands full of idness behind. Those folks just couldn't get a plane ticket and get on a plane. And it's no different from the Indians or the Pakistanis or the Afghans or any other group to whom Black folks in general tend to look up as if they got their stuff together, and they don't. China is full of Chinese idness. India is full of derelicts and bums. So too is Pakistan. So too is Afghanistan. We just get to see the educated doctors and engineers when we're in the States. That's all. You know how I know? Because here in Saudi, you have everybody from India, you got everybody from Pakistan. You got what you don't have is a criminal, because they can't get a visa anyway with a criminal record. But you got the low IQ construction worker, the high IQ physician or engineer from both. You understand, gentlemen? All I want is for anyone that goes into the States to not lie about the people they had to leave behind and use that to try to point the finger and pathologize FBA people. And all I want is for FBA people. I want for my specific nationality within our race to stop assuming that everyone that ain't us nationally looks down on us as a bunch of lost mutts. That's not true either. Most don't. That is absolutely not true. It's not even close. Most people from the islands and from the continent have a mixed view of us. But one of the reasons why more and more and more of them are beginning to have a negative view of us is because not only are they seeing negative stereotypes on TV, they're also seeing good depictions on TV. I mean, on TV, we could rob you at an ATM, or we could turn around and be saving the life of the president. Yeah, either one. Not that I'm supporting American politics. The point I'm making is that we could be anything on TV. They know that. But they're hearing some of the anti-intellectualism that comes from us. And they're hearing that through social media, not just on TV in Hollywood. We have to admit this. They're coming from societies in which you discriminate based on class. We don't believe in discriminating against someone because they don't have money, and that's fine. I don't believe in that. But we do need to start discriminating based on attitude. And that's where they're right. We cannot sit up here and take the worst amongst us as being the most authentic. I would ask that we stop that mess. And that anyone that goes to the United States and starts dealing with Black American, stop lying about where they came from, about who's there, who's waiting outside the airport where they came from. Because if it was that great, you wouldn't have left. We all got work to do. Thank you for listening, guys. As always, Black heart, Black mind, blackout, assalamu alaikum, and Black heterosexual, non-select, non-idness male power just because they don't like it, and Black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day.